Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Cars.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
And hello and welcome to MotorWeek's 12th podcast. I am John Davis, and first thing I want to do is thank everyone out there for making our podcast on MotorWeek Online such a success. And we're going to get right to it again. Today, joining us, our road test producer, Brian Robinson.
Hello.
Our writer, Shamit Choksi.
Hi, John.
And our reporter, Stephen Chupnick.
Hello.
And let's get to the heart of the matter, which is new cars. Brian Robinson, you are fresh back from the 2009 Geneva Motor Show, the last major European auto show of the season. I mean, we've still got New York coming up here in the U.S., but that pretty much finishes it for Europe. I've read several things. I've read that it was kind of a downer, and then but looking at all the cars, it looked like there were an awful lot of interesting hardware. So what's your take?
Yeah, I'd say Geneva is known for a lot of glitz and glamour, a lot of high style, and it was toned down a little bit, but it was still typical Geneva. There's usually a lot of high-end, one-off luxury car type things, and some more smaller, moderate European type cars, and it was basically along those lines as well.
That show is usually, as you mentioned, kind of a fashion or style show. Yeah. Any trends that you saw that you think might be running through the industry?
Not really. The Infinity Essence was probably one of the concepts that drew the most attention. And it's not really a concept of another car, but it's more of the essence of the Infinity brand and where they're going. And
new
of course,
look, in other words?
Yeah, a little bit of a new look. Yeah, you should check it out on the website somewhere if you can find it. It's of course, it's hybrid powered. Everyone's green. Every concept now has got to be hybrid powered. So.
But beyond it looked to me from looking at all the reports from the show and reading your report from the show that there weren't a lot of vehicles there that are going to impact the American consumer too much. There was the production version of the new Chevy small car, right? The Spark. And anything else you thought that's going to come here that people will say, wow, okay?
Well, that was one thing. Usually you'll see these little econo boxes over there, and they're nice, and you ask about them, and they're like, yeah, no chance that we're going to sell that in the States. But almost everybody, when you talk to them, was like, we're really looking into bringing that to the States. Volkswagen Polo, we've never gotten that here. Talking about bringing that in. So
Ford showed a concept, the Iosis Max, I guess.
Yeah, it's 5-door hatch. A little bit bigger than a real Econo, more of a.
They're saying it's sort of like a small crossover. You thought it was too small, or?
No, it was
pretty cool.
Yeah, Kia Rondo size, something along those lines. Mazda 5.
So, did the show meet your expectations, or?
Yeah, Geneva's always a fun show. It's compact, easy to get around, and like I say, lots of glitz and glamour.
What about the new Mercedes?
E-Class. Yeah, that's an important car for them. I think they got beat up a little bit for the C-Class, and this is kind of their bread and butter, the E-Class. So it's nice, and tons of techno goodies, wizardry that you wouldn't even think of. It's in there, even more so than what the current S-Class is getting.
A little sharper styling, too.
Yeah, smooth it out a little bit, and you get a coupe now as well.
And we're going to get a diesel version of that, a Blue Tech.
Sure. In Geneva also, you sometimes see these green supercars that come out. And
sure.
The Namir hybrid, I that caught my eye just because you got this Ferrari-like vehicle that gives 110 miles to the gallon. I mean, of course, it'll never see the light of day.
Does it really? That's the first question.
But was that getting a lot of attention?
Yeah, there's a whole section of really niche high performance makers there, and they always have these. I think Spiker, Koenigsegg, it's like a German one, and they're all either like diesel powered or hybrid,
right?
E85
or all electric.
Running. Yeah, it's amazing, and it's they've got video of them running around, and
it seems like Geneva's like where that's happening. That's kind of their little claim to fame.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of it there.
Mm-hmm. It looked like an interesting show, and from what I could tell from the footage, it certainly didn't look like it was a particular downer. Sometimes I think people write the headlines before they go.
Yeah, they want it to be a downer. Yeah. And then they see it once.
And so that's it for Europe until next fall when we go to Frankfurt. I think they're already talking about the cars there. Okay, this is switching gears time. Shamit, since you were joining in there, let's go to you next. A very, very important car that basically has just bowed the new generation of the Lexus RX. Specifically, our test on the show is of the 450h hybrid. What's your overall view?
I mean, it's a perfect example of Toyota's latest green advancements. Its predecessor, obviously, is the 400h, which was the premium level hybrid crossover. This thing is just a huge step up over that. It has a ton more in terms of the hybrid drive system is way more improved.
It's almost a 15% fuel economy boost. I mean, well into the 30s, which is pretty significant.
Correct. I mean, it has and it has more power. It has batteries smaller. Power control unit is smaller. And it has two new features, two new, I would say, technology systems that have sort of come into play. One is the exhaust gas recirculation system, and the other is the exhaust heat recovery system. Both of these are also promoting the fuel economy standpoint.
The exhaust gas recirculation system, which is not a new thing on cars, but it's the way they're using it on this particular hybrid is to, again, save fuel and to cut down on some of the heat that has to be taken care of in the after system, I believe.
Right, so it basically eliminates the need for fuel enrichment, which
saves gas.
Exactly.
Now, what about power? Are people that have the current hybrid, are they going to be disappointed, pleased?
I mean, how can you can't really be disappointed. You're getting better fuel economy and more power. You're looking at the system's giving you 27 more horsepower. It's just better all the way around.
As before, it's also standard and front-wheel drive.
Standard front-wheel drive. With the all-wheel drive, it's front-wheel drive. It has 2 electric motors. With the all-wheel drive, it has a 3rd electric motor that helps the system along.
It much sharper to look at. I mean, all the RXs look like that they're while very evolutionary, they've done a lot of creasing and made them look. I was just looking at one today. It looks more shark-like, I think.
Yeah,
than before.
More aggressive looking for sure, and matches up to the handling too. It's got a wider track, revised rear suspension, so it drives a little bit more tighter, firmer feel.
Yeah, I mean that's like you're taking a car that was already one of the best in its feel and just upping it that much better.
Making it better. That's what it's about.
Stephen Chupnick, we're going to go back to the future with you. Your segment on the return of the DeLorean. Fascinating. Here's a car much better known on the silver screen in Back to the Future movies than it was on the streets. A car that John DeLorean, who was the father of the GTO, tried to get off the ground only to wind up in jail with some drug charges. But who's behind bringing this car back? You've been there. You've seen it. You've driven it. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, it's a guy. He's British, and his name is Stephen Wynn, and not the guy from Vegas. But
it sounds like he may be gambling a lot anyway.
It is true. But this guy, we went down to Houston where the new facilities are, and this warehouse is enormous. It's got parts from the 80s, which actually when the car stopped production, they made 1,000 more parts of every portion of the car. The chassis, the doors, those famous wing doors there's 1,000 of them still in the factory.
And these are all original parts that were made back in the early 80s, and that's what he's reassembling now. Completely new cars from.
Completely new cars. In fact, we met one of the guys who is buying one, and he came in. It was probably one of the funniest lines he ever said. He goes, "Why get a used '80s car when I can buy a new '80s car?" And it is true. We met this other guy who actually works for DeLorean, who's worked for the DeLorean Motor Company since 1979, who was telling us stories that one mostly can't be repeated on the air. But he did say that this Stephen Wynn, who now has the products, has done more for this car in the last maybe 15 years than John DeLorean ever did for anything.
Well, Stephen also, he was in the business of refurbishing old DeLoreans. Right. You could take them to his shop and he would rebuild them for you. Now he's gone the next step and actually reissuing the car. Now, I know you had a chance to drive the new car. and you weren't around when we tested the original car on MotorWeek. I wanted one so bad. I mean, it was a car that I was really lusting after until I drove it. And the factory was very, very reticent about letting the press drive the car. They kept putting everybody off. And once we got in it, we could see why, because it didn't handle very well, which was really amazing since it had a car with a chassis designed by Colin Chapman, who began Lotus. So any indication from your short drive, I mean, he doesn't have original tires on this car.
No, the tires are the original tires as well.
No, they can't be.
Well, they're the original design. It's not not the actual tires, but the original design is still there. And there was still power. I mean, you
found the car handled okay in corners?
Not as well, but it did handle. I mean, I was able to do, a couple loops. And
the big thing was the back end was always kind of skittish, like an old Porsche. Did you feel anything like that?
It was just hard, just to get going. There was the power steering was nil to not at all.
Oh, yeah, it didn't. It was pretty numb. But I must say, I love looking at them. I loved them in the movies. I still, we were just doing our stand-up for Steven's segment against a friend of ours who's got one. I still think it was a cool car. And I think it's very excited that they're back in production and it's available again. An old car doesn't die these days, which is a good thing. Okay, I guess that pretty much wraps it up for our MotorWeek podcast number 12. As always, I'd like to thank our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, for making sure you can hear us loud and clear, our podcast creator, Bob Mixter, and our producer, Michelle Parka, who makes sure that we get into the studio on time and always has refreshments and basically starts pointing at me when we're going over time. For all of us at MotorWeek, I hope you'll join us for more podcasts in the coming weeks, and be sure to catch MotorWeek on all your public television stations.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Cars.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at MotorWeek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.